Deadliest Catch was a legendary show. It showed the tough world of crab fishing. It had teamwork, brotherhood, and bond that made the crew feel like family, which is why fans stayed connected for years. But behind the cameras and crab pots, a harder truth began to surface. Unforgettable faces who made the show feel like family have passed away or disappeared from the spotlight. From silent struggles behind the scenes to sudden losses that shook the fishing community, who were they? What really happened to them? And what truths were hidden beyond the deck? Join us as we uncover the truth behind their stories. Phil Harris. If there is one name that defines the emotional history of Deadliest Catch, it is Phil Harris. He was the captain and part owner of the fishing vessel Cornelia Marie, a ship that appeared in nearly every season of the show from its very first episode. Harris began crab fishing at just 21 years old, making him one of the youngest captains in the fleet. And by the time television audiences met him, he had already spent more than 2 decades battling the brutal waters of the Bering Sea. He commanded Cornelia Marie the way a patriarch runs a household, with absolute authority, fierce loyalty, and a rough-edged sense of humor that made him one of the most unforgettable personalities in reality television history. But beyond the reputation and the legendary status, Phil Harris was also a father. His sons, Josh Harris and Jake Harris, worked alongside him aboard the vessel, and the relationship between them was loving, tense, protective, and deeply complicated, giving the show an emotional weight that went far beyond crab fishing. To many viewers, Phil Harris seemed larger than life, respected by his crew, feared by competitors, and admired by fans around the world. But while audiences watched what looked like the life of an unstoppable sea captain, a devastating tragedy was quietly approaching, one that would become one of the most heartbreaking moments in the history of Deadliest Catch. Keep watching to see how things unfolded. On January 29, 2010, while filming Season 6, Harris suffered a massive stroke while unloading Opilio crab at St. Paul Island. He was airlifted to a hospital in Anchorage. In one of the most disturbing and widely discussed moments in the show's history, he reportedly told the film crew not to stop filming as he collapsed. He was placed in an induced coma to reduce pressure and swelling in his brain, briefly showed signs of improvement, and then suffered a second intracranial hemorrhage. Phil Harris died on February 9, 2010, at the age of 53. His sons later published a biography about their father after his death. The fishing vessel Cornelia Marie continued on without him, but for many fans of the series, it never truly felt the same again. But that tragedy was only the beginning of the many heartbreaking moments that would shake the cast of Deadliest Catch. So stay tuned. Tony Lara. When Phil Harris passed away in 2010, the loss changed the entire emotional core of Deadliest Catch. For years, Phil had been the heart of the fishing vessel Cornelia Marie, and replacing him felt almost impossible. But eventually, someone had to take the captain's chair. That person was Tony Lara, a veteran fisherman, Alaska native, and longtime friend of the Harris family. Lara already had decades of experience on the sea and operated his own freight company, but stepping aboard the Cornelia Marie carried a completely different kind of pressure. He wasn't simply replacing a captain. He was stepping into the role of a man millions of viewers had grown attached to over 6 seasons. Josh Harris personally brought Tony Lara aboard at the beginning of the winter 2011 season. From the start, fans understood how difficult the situation was. The Cornelia Marie no longer felt like just another fishing vessel. It had become a symbol of Phil Harris's memory, and every decision Lara made would inevitably be compared to the captain who came before him. Despite that pressure, Lara handled the responsibility with professionalism and quiet strength. He appeared in 6 episodes during Season 7 before eventually stepping away from the captaincy and returning to his freight business in Alaska. Years later, another tragedy struck the Deadliest Catch family. On August 8, 2015, while attending the famous motorcycle rally in Sturgis, Tony Lara suffered a heart attack and passed away at just 50 years old. His death deeply affected those closest to him, especially Josh Harris, who publicly honored Lara for always supporting the Harris family during one of the hardest periods of their lives. Josh described Tony Lara as someone who taught, advised, and helped make everyone around him better. Captain Keith Colburn also mourned his passing, remembering Lara as someone who had spent most of his life at sea before tragically dying on land. Tony Lara's story carried a strange emotional weight because he represented both loss and loyalty within the Deadliest Catch world. He entered one of the most emotionally difficult roles imaginable and did everything he could to guide Cornelia Marie through an impossible transition. Even though his time on the show was brief, many fans still remember him as the steady hand who helped keep Phil Harris's legacy alive during its darkest chapter. Nick McGlashan. Speaking of unforgettable personalities on Deadliest Catch, another crew member whose story deeply affected fans was Nick McGlashan. With his fearless attitude, sharp humor, and relentless work ethic, Nick quickly became one of the show's most recognizable faces. Fishing was already in his blood. He came from a long line of fishermen, and from an early age he understood exactly how brutal life on the Bering Sea could be. Long, freezing nights, dangerous waters, and exhausting labor were simply part of survival. Nick started as a deckhand, slowly earning respect until he eventually became deck boss aboard the Summer Bay. But what made him stand out wasn't just toughness. Nick McGlashan genuinely cared about the people around him. He pushed younger crew members to improve, stayed calm during high-pressure situations, and balanced the chaos of crab fishing with a sense of humor that made him easy to root for. As the seasons continued, though, fans began noticing subtle changes. Nick started appearing less often, and his focus slowly shifted away from the boats and toward his personal life and family. Behind the scenes, he was also dealing with difficult personal struggles and ongoing health concerns that viewers knew very little about at the time. After 5 seasons, Nick quietly stepped away from the spotlight. Sadly, the hardest part of his story was still ahead. In December 2020, after what seemed like a normal day, Nick suddenly collapsed at home and was found unresponsive. He was rushed to the hospital, but doctors could not save him. Nick McGlashan passed away on December 27, 2020, at only 33 years old. His death devastated fans and fellow fishermen alike. What remains today is the memory of someone tough, funny, resilient, and painfully human. For many viewers, Nick's journey became a reminder that even the strongest people can quietly carry pain nobody else fully sees. And this is where it gets really emotional. Todd Kuchin. Another heartbreaking story connected to Deadliest Catch involves Todd Kuchin, a crew member whose quiet toughness and dedication left a lasting impression on fans. From the moment he appeared aboard the fishing vessel Patricia Lee, Todd stood out as someone completely committed to the dangerous world of crab fishing. He wasn't interested in fame or television attention. For Todd, the job itself was what mattered. While many people feared the freezing waters and brutal conditions of the Bering Sea, Todd seemed to embrace them. He worked with calm focus, handled pressure without panic, and carried the kind of confidence that only comes from years of experience on the water. What made Todd especially respected among the crew was his reliability. Commercial crab fishing is one of the most dangerous professions in the world. where exhaustion, freezing temperatures, and heavy equipment can turn deadly in seconds. Yet Todd approached every challenge with steady discipline and determination. Captain Rip Carlton and the rest of the crew depended on fishermen like him, people who understood that survival at sea required trust, focus, and resilience. Over time, viewers began to admire not just Todd's work ethic, but also the quiet strength he brought to every situation aboard the Patricia Lee. But the harsh dangers of life at sea eventually led to tragedy. In 2021, while working on deck, Todd Kuchin became involved in a devastating accident after crab fishing equipment malfunctioned. More than 800 pounds of gear suddenly crashed onto his body, leaving the crew desperately trying to save his life. Despite every effort to help him survive, the injuries proved fatal. Todd Kuchin passed away on February 26, 2021, at just 30 years old. His death deeply shocked the Deadliest Catch community and reminded viewers that the dangers shown on the series are painfully real. Though his time on the show was brief, Todd's courage, resilience, and dedication continue to be remembered by fans and fellow fishermen alike. But that's not all. Justin Tennyson. One of the saddest stories connected to Deadliest Catch involves Justin Tennyson, a hard-working fisherman who appeared in Season 7 aboard the fishing vessel Time Bandit. Under Captain Jonathan Hillstrand, Justin quickly built a reputation as the kind of crew member every captain wanted on deck. He was dependable, strong, and easy to work with, someone who handled the brutal demands of crab fishing without complaint. Life aboard the Time Bandit wasn't easy. The freezing temperatures, dangerous waves, and constant exhaustion pushed every fisherman to the limit. But Justin seemed built for that world. He worked hard, stayed focused, and earned the respect of both the crew and viewers almost immediately. What makes Justin's story especially heartbreaking is how suddenly everything changed. In February 2011, he had only just returned from what would unknowingly become his final trip at sea. To the people around him, nothing appeared seriously wrong. But only 4 days after coming ashore, tragedy struck without warning. On February 22, 2011, Justin Tennyson was found dead in a hotel room in Homer. He was just 33 years old. An autopsy later revealed that the cause of death was complications related to sleep apnea, a condition many people underestimate despite how dangerous it can become. Justin left behind 2 children, along with friends and crewmates who struggled to process how quickly his life had ended. The emotional impact of his death became even stronger once Season 7 finally aired. Most viewers had no idea that the fisherman they were watching on screen had already passed away months earlier. Every scene featuring Justin suddenly carried a painful sense of sadness. Fans were unknowingly watching someone laugh, work, and plan for the future, while already knowing that future would never come. The Time Bandit crew later described him as tough as a bull, and remembered him as one of the best deckhands they had worked beside. Justin Tennyson's story became another reminder that the tragedies surrounding Deadliest Catch do not always happen in the middle of violent storms or deadly waves. Sometimes life can end quietly and unexpectedly, long after the boats return to shore. Even though his time on the series was brief, Justin left behind the image of a fisherman respected not only for his toughness, but also for the kindness and reliability he brought to everyone around him. Blake Painter. Another unforgettable figure from Deadliest Catch was Blake Painter, the man who became captain of the fishing vessel Maverick at only 38 years old. That achievement made him the youngest captain featured during the show's 3rd season. Blake first appeared in Season 2 as a deckhand, but it quickly became obvious that he had natural leadership ability. He carried himself with confidence, worked aggressively, and had the kind of commanding personality that either earns immediate respect or creates conflict, sometimes both at once. On screen, he was charismatic, capable, and ambitious, the type of fisherman viewers expected to become one of the long-term faces of the series. But after Season 3, Blake Painter suddenly disappeared from Deadliest Catch. Away from television, his life became increasingly difficult as he struggled with serious substance abuse issues. Over the years, those struggles reportedly worsened, pulling him further away from the career and reputation he had once built on the Bering Sea. In 2018, Blake was arrested for driving under the influence in Astoria. Not long afterward, friends and family became concerned after losing contact with him completely. Eventually, they requested a welfare check at his home. When officers arrived, they discovered Blake Painter dead inside the residence. Authorities later stated that he had likely been dead for 1 to 2 days before being found. Drug paraphernalia connected to heroin and methamphetamine use was reportedly discovered near his body. Blake Painter was only 38 years old and left behind 2 daughters. Blake's death became one of the most painful reminders that the dangers surrounding Deadliest Catch do not always end once fishermen leave the ocean. While the Bering Sea is known for violent storms and deadly accidents, some of the hardest battles happen quietly away from the cameras. Blake Painter once represented youth, ambition, and leadership within the fleet. His rise through the ranks showed how quickly someone could earn respect in one of the world's toughest professions. But his later struggles revealed the emotional toll that life inside and outside the fishing industry can sometimes create. Even years after his death, Blake Painter's story continues to resonate with fans because it reflects both the excitement and the tragedy that often surrounds the world of Deadliest Catch. And as you can see, Blake was not the only one who became entangled in substance abuse issues. Mahlon Reyes. Mahlon Reyes was a hard-working and well-liked deckhand who first appeared in Season 8. Over the years, he worked across multiple vessels, including the fishing vessel Seabrook and the fishing vessel Cape Caution. Mahlon wasn't a captain or a headline name, but on deck he was exactly the kind of crew member every boat depends on. He showed up, did the work without complaint, and earned the respect of captains who were not easily impressed. At sea, that kind of reliability matters more than anything else, and Mahlon built his reputation on exactly that. He was 38 years old when he died. In July 2020, reports first emerged that Mahlon Reyes had suffered a heart attack. However, later findings revealed a more tragic and complicated truth. According to an autopsy report obtained months later, his death was caused by acute cocaine intoxication, ruled as an accidental overdose. The drug triggered a cardiac event that ultimately proved fatal. His passing added another painful chapter to the growing list of losses surrounding the Deadliest Catch community, coming at a time when cast members and fans were already processing grief from earlier tragedies. Mahlon Reyes' story stood out because it reflected how quickly life can change, even for someone who seemed strong, active, and constantly working in one of the toughest professions in the world. On the surface, he was a fisherman defined by physical endurance and teamwork, but behind that was a life that ultimately ended far too soon. Ross Jones. Ross Jones served as a greenhorn aboard the FV Saga, and while he wasn't known for major storylines or dramatic moments, he brought something just as important to Deadliest Catch: personality. His crewmates often described him as a goofball, a simple word that, in the harsh environment of commercial fishing, meant someone who could lighten the mood and keep the human side of the boat alive. On a vessel where exhaustion, pressure, and danger are constant, that kind of presence matters more than most people realize. Ross was well liked by both crew and viewers because he felt real. He wasn't trying to be a television character, he was just a young fisherman learning the rhythm of life at sea. His warmth and humor made him stand out, even in small moments that didn't involve fishing at all. For many fans, he represented the early struggles and growth that define greenhorn life on the Bering Sea. He passed away in June 2022. His death was announced on June 22, 2022, through the Deadliest Catch World Facebook group. Out of respect for his family, no official cause of death was publicly released. He left behind a young son and his partner, Chloe. Unlike many other losses connected to the show, his passing was shared quietly, reflecting a more private grief within the fishing community. Some stories are not built for headlines, but for memory. And sadly, the story surrounding the passing of the next person on our list is even more painful. Nick Mavar. Nick Mavar was one of the most familiar and respected faces aboard the fishing vessel Northwestern, working as the longtime maintenance mechanic under Captain Sig Hansen. Over nearly 100 episodes of Deadliest Catch, Nick became known as the quiet backbone of the Northwestern. While others were in front of the camera, he was usually behind the scenes making sure engines ran, systems stayed alive, and the boat kept moving in conditions that constantly tried to break it apart. Without that kind of work, nothing else on the vessel would function. But Nick Mavar's story was not only about machinery. One of the most emotional parts of his journey involved his relationship with his nephew, Jake Anderson. Nick played a major role in helping Jake through addiction and back toward sobriety, becoming both an uncle and a guiding figure during one of the most difficult periods of Jake's life. Their bond added a deeply human layer to the show, showing how family ties can survive even in the harshest environments. Nick left Deadliest Catch in 2021 after suffering a ruptured appendix and later being diagnosed with a cancerous tumor. He continued working in commercial fishing after his departure. On June 13, 2024, while preparing for salmon season in Naknek, Alaska, he suffered a heart attack and passed away at 59 years old. His death was confirmed by Jake Anderson, who described his uncle's final moments with deep emotion. The Northwestern community mourned him as someone who had dedicated his life to keeping the boat alive, both mechanically and emotionally. Tom Brussard. Finally, one of the deepest emotional losses from Deadliest Catch was Tom Brussard, the longtime engineer aboard the FV Saga and the closest friend of Captain Jake Anderson. Together, the two men worked to rebuild the Saga, turning what was originally just a fishing vessel into a shared project built on trust, effort, and years of teamwork. Their relationship went far beyond co-workers. In the fishing world, where crews often live together for months at sea, bonds like this become something closer to family. Tom Brussard was known as steady, dependable, and deeply loyal. He was someone Jake Anderson trusted completely, both on and off the water. That friendship became one of the most genuine relationships ever shown on Deadliest Catch, giving viewers a rare look at real emotional connection in a high-pressure environment. Tom passed away on January 27, 2024, one day after his 64th birthday, at his home in Calbayog, Philippines. His wife believed the cause was a heart attack. The news reached Jake Anderson during filming, and the moment was later shown in Season 20 of Deadliest Catch. Viewers saw Jake receive the call in real time, and his reaction was completely unfiltered, filled with shock and grief that could not be staged. Tom Brussard was survived by his wife, children, and grandchildren. But for Jake Anderson, and for fans who watched their friendship unfold, he was something even more personal. A best friend lost too soon, whose presence helped shape one of the most human stories the show ever told. What do you think about these heartbreaking and unexpected stories behind the cast of Deadliest Catch? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from the world of Deadliest Catch and beyond. Click on the next video showing on your screen. You won't want to miss what comes next.